Welcome to the Deal by Me podcast, where we ask guests to tell us your story. Hello there, this is Dr. James W. Smith, your host. We seek to transform lives by encouraging and inspiring. Someone encouraged and inspired this host, a former lawyer, gambler, inmate, and his life was transformed. The same can happen to you. So when you listen to any of the Deal by Me podcasts, please support this podcast with a donation or a monthly recurring amount for as little as $3. If you are viewing any of the podcasts on YouTube, please subscribe. To supporters of this podcast, we say thank you. Check out my encouraging, inspiring, and transforming books. I'm available for speaking engagements, in person and virtual seminars, so please contact me through my website, www.dealbyme.com. I have with me Tristina Anderson, whose story of resilience and reinvention resonates deeply with audiences. She openly shares how she transformed from living on autopilot to intentionally crafting a fulfilling life. She has over 25 years of corporate leadership experience across industries, sharing invaluable insights on balancing professional ambition with personal well-being. I know you're going to be excited to hear what Tristina has to say with us at this time on the Deal by Me podcast. So, Christina, I am so thrilled to have you come and share with listeners of this podcast. So, would you share with listeners a little bit about yourself and where you're located as this interview is being taken place?
Sure. Well, thank you, Dr. Smith. I'm really happy and grateful to be here and welcome to your audience. I am a dedicated wife, a mother, and a grandmother who's actually centered my work around empowering people to live their highest vision. Currently, right now, I am in Red Deer, Alberta, Canada, and I also live in Puerto Vallarta, Mexico. Right now, because it's still fall, I'm in Canada. Pretty
I,
soon I'm going to be leaving.
I definitely can understand that. No question about that.
Yeah.
Well, Canada is going to be cold and it's going to be nice in Mexico. All right,
Yeah.
I get you. Uh, Christina, I am so thrilled to have you, as I said before, and your profile and your story is so very intriguing and exciting. I am just amazed at how you are doing it and have done it. And so I just want to talk a little bit about you and your life and where you uh, have been and where you are now.
Great.
So let me ask you this question. You are obviously someone who has redesigned your life. And maybe I'm saying that the wrong way. I don't know, but I think you can kind of feel where I'm going.
Mhm.
And so let's talk about that a little bit. What steps did you take to, you know, redesign your life, and how can somebody else take that same road in designing or making their life different?
Well, that's a really good question, and I think to answer it properly for your audience is I need to roll back the time a little bit.
Okay.
So I grew up actually in a farm in Saskatchewan. I would have, in my mind, had a very privileged life. I had an indoor swimming pool. I had horses and stuff like that. And from the outside, I think friends and family would have probably thought, I had it all. However, on the inside, my dad was an alcoholic. And
Mm-hmm.
so it caused a lot of challenges in my life, in my upbringing. Sometimes we could have friends over, sometimes we couldn't. However, when I was 13 years old, my parents got divorced. And right at that peak of impressionism at 13, I moved with my mom and my brother to another town, actually a town where my mom was from. And we went from that kind of affluent life to living in a low rental where my mom's vehicle ended up being repossessed. And I remember we moved in September, and around November, my mom had said that we weren't going to actually have Christmas presents that year. So that really resonated a lot with me. And I decided that I was going to get a job at 13.
Mm-hmm.
And I started sewing purses. And I was so proud of myself that I was able to buy my mom and my brother a Christmas present. And at the time, I was thinking, looking at the challenges my mom had gone through, is I had created a mindset for myself that I was never going to rely on others for financial independence. So that kind of took me into a certain type of trajectory where even when I graduated high school, I would work full time and go to school full time because I wanted to have this independence. I wanted to be the CEO of the boardroom, right?
Mm-hmm.
And that was really my driver.
Mm-hmm.
In my early 20s, I ended up getting into into a relationship where I ended up marrying this man. Um, and when I was 6 months pregnant, almost 6 months pregnant, so I would have been almost 25 at the time. Um, I had was diagnosed HIV positive.
Okay.
So I was informed that my husband at the time had given me this health condition, and I was 6 months pregnant and 25 years old. And this is 1996.
Mm-hmm.
Back then, things were quite different in how they were. And I remember going to the doctors the first time where my doctor had told me that I probably only had a couple years to live. And my child was probably only going to have a couple years to live. Um, so that really hit hard for me. And I remember I'm not a spiritual person, but I believe in the universe.
Mm-hmm.
And I remember always growing up, my mom used to say, you're not given stuff that you're not able to handle. But at the time, I was like, what? Why? And I remember as I was going through kind of the emotions, I had a conversation with myself whereas, I'm not going to die. I'm going to figure out all I can to live the best healthy life I possibly can. I ended up having my son. He HIV negative. And so I built a trajectory on going through what those challenges were. Um, there was some ebbs and some flows. I ended up having to, even though I was married, I wasn't planning on being off work earlier because of all of the health conditions and stuff. So there was a point in time in my life where I ended up having to apply for social assistance
Mm-hmm.
because I didn't have the financial stability with this health condition, having to drive to all the doctors. And I had planned on breastfeeding, but that was no longer an option. And I remember going in applying for social assistance. I was like, how did this slide in my life happen? And I think, as all of us, we kind of have those reflection points where you think your life is going in a
Mm-hmm.
certain direction. I
Mm-hmm.
talk autopilot, and all of a sudden you're faced with something that forces a realignment.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I always embraced life. So there was never a time where I thought that life needed to be disrespected. I embraced that there was a reason why these things were happening. I didn't know why, but
Mm-hmm.
there was. So, anyways, I went through these steps, and after a few years, my health was really well. Through intervention of the hospital and stuff, I ended up getting pregnant intentionally for the second time, and had a daughter, and she was also HIV negative. So at this point in time, I had two kids. But I was resonating back to that 13-year-old girl when I saw my parents get divorced, and thought I needed to build financial independence for my kids. I didn't know how many years I would have left on this
Mm,
human universe. So I focused on getting a master's degree, getting a doctorate degree, building this professional role. And what I had noticed is I was sacrificing time with my kids, who were a gift,
mhm,
to build financial independence. And
mm,
so I was really struggling. I'm sure a lot of your audience, we have those struggles where, where people talk about work-life balance, but
mhm.
balance definition is really equal distribution. You
Okay.
can't have equal distribution
Mhm.
when you're dedicating a disproportionate time of work. Um, and we went on a holiday to Mexico, and we had gone a few times. And my son, actually, at this point in time, was going to be going into grade 10. And he said to me, he said, "Mom," he said, "why can't we just live here?" And when he said that, I thought, you know what? I might be able to make that happen. So that whole decision to say, put myself in a trajectory is, I want to spend time with my children.
Okay.
They're a gift to me. I'm still alive. All of these things are in place. So I actually left the corporate world, started my own business consulting company, bought a house in Mexico, sold my house in Canada, and relocated there with my kids. This is about 13 years ago now. Um, so I could have that precious time with them.
Okay. Let me kind of move this along a little bit because your stories are so excited and intriguing, and I know listeners to this podcast, you know, are getting a lot from it. But through all of this, you've had your challenges
Mhm.
and the life challenges, and you've just mentioned some of them. What you were going through, uh, you know, uh, the marriage, the HIV challenges, and I can visualize and kind of feel where you are. So how did you overcome these major challenges and transform them into opportunities? Because listening to you, you've obviously done that. So listeners to this podcast would like to know how you did that. What was it that gave you this kind of what would I say, something on the inside that made you say, look, I gotta do it.
I think what it was for me is I didn't want to left anything undone, right? I didn't want to live my life with regrets. I didn't want to put my head on the pillow for the last time saying, I wish I would have done these things. I think the biggest thing is when I relocated to Mexico, I didn't know how it was going to happen. That was
Okay.
very scary with my kids. But I took one step at a time. And
Mhm.
sometimes, not sometimes, always, when you make a decision and you want to transform the things in your life, you make those decisions, the universe gives you opportunities that you never thought were ever available.
Mm, okay.
And I think that's where it is, make the decision, take the steps that you can take with what you have from where you are, regardless of the situations that are going on. I think all individuals, sometimes they look at their circumstances or conditions, say, I don't have the money, or I don't have the
Hmm.
resources, I don't have the education, but subconsciously we do have everything that we need. And
Mm,
you make the decision and you do what you can. And that's how I have chosen to live my life,
hmm.
is by design,
Okay.
even though the steps could be scary.
I hear you. I hear you very well. Well, since we're on that road, I, I'm kind of interested. You're interesting, and I love your profile. I love talking with you. This dialogue is very interesting. You know, but obviously, in the midst of all of this, there has to be some fear
Hmm.
that comes with it. And so I'm interested in how can you or people, embrace this fear and then use it as a catalyst for growth. Are you following where I'm coming from?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
How can that happen?
I think we have to make our own internal decisions, whether, whether the decision or the steps you're going to take are going to be scary or not. Life is scary,
Hmm.
right? And sometimes, like I said, certain steps in my life had to apply for social assistance or all of these other things. You have a sense of sometimes disappointment in yourself. But if you don't go for it, you're also going to be disappointed. So you have to have those conversations with yourself, take the steps that you can take and move it forward, regardless, like I said, of the circumstances. Yeah, life is scary, but that's what I said is I work some with my clients now about
Okay.
no regrets.
Oh, I love that. I love that. I'm just excited talking with you, Tristina. You a very interesting guest. I started my podcast because I had was going to retire from my pastorate. I pastored for 32 years, and I wanted to start a podcast before I retired because I want to kind of keep my ministry going by doing things I thought would be encouraging, inspiring, and hopefully transforming to people. And so most of the guests that I bring on, some have written books, but they are persons who have gone through situations in their lives, like you. This is a
Mhm.
you are a perfect guest, and they have somehow managed. And so what I've done is try to take what I'm hearing from these guests and help people who are listening to my podcast. And so what I want to ask you, what would you say to listeners of this podcast who have had some real life challenges themselves? I don't know how many may have be suffering or had HIV challenges. Somebody else may have gone through something else. We've had, it could be a divorce, it could be financial situations, it could be anything. But based upon where you have gone and how you have made yourself come through this, what would you say to them that would be encouraging, inspiring, and transforming?
Oh, that's a a very heavy question. I think one of the there's a couple.
Okay.
What one of the things that has really helped me is visualizing the life that I would love to have.
Okay.
When I visualize that, then I take it down and I put it into writing. Because what
Mm,
I find is sometimes, not always, but most people spend more time planning a vacation or planning a special event than they do planning their life. And as
love
far
that.
as we know, we're only here one time.
Mm,
So, in the business world, we do a strategic plan for companies, but very few people do a strategic plan for their own life.
mm,
We get up every day and we do the same thing over and over and over again. Um, I think if we, regardless of the challenges that somebody may be going through, what would you actually love your life to look like? And once you
mm,
take the time to write that down, visualize it, we think in pictures, you know, think about some of those things. I've done that with myself when it came to my health conditions is
mm,
I want to be a healthy, vibrant individual. Um, and again, I'm not sure exactly how all the
mhm,
things in the universe work, but there's been a lot of knowledge gained over the last few decades about those type of aspects. So I think
mm.
the first one is what would you love your life to be and what can
Okay.
you do today to move that forward? Even
Mm,
if you have no money,
okay.
thoughts lead to things. So, start simple.
Makes a lot of sense. I hear you very well, very well, and I know listeners uh, are taking that to heart today. I am reading your profile, and I know you obviously worked at a corporate career, and you've done so many things. I don't even want to have to, go through all that.
Yeah.
Moving from uh, Canada to Mexico, from Mexico back to Canada. We can go through all of this, but
Yeah.
I'm not, I'm not ready to go through all it right now. But I mean, what lessons from your corporate career have you taken that you feel like you could apply to your personal transformation?
Well, so I've been very blessed in my corporate world. I've been CEO of many different types of organizations, and I've actually been what I call a parachute CEO, where the board of directors terminated their C-suite, and I would come in and help the organization make the changes that they had wanted to make. Um, that role paid very well. But what I found is individuals within organizations that are going through changes spend a disproportionate amount of time building or realigning the company's objectives. Whether you're an entrepreneur or working for somebody else, we do that. And it's not mutually beneficial sometimes. We feel as a C-suite or an individual or an entrepreneur that we have a sense of obligation to these companies to make them better for the shareholders. And over the years, when I would come in and help organization make those changes, I saw those individuals who dedicated 10, 15 hours for weeks, if not months, be terminated,
Mm,
right? And that's why I made that pivotal decision. I work a lot with clients now whose organization are going through those changes to say, you can have, like I said, we talk about work-life balance, but balance definition is equal distribution. And you can't necessarily have work-life balance when you're dedicating a disproportionate amount of time for your work. So what I like to look at it is work-life time balance. So if you're giving to one, you're taking away from other. Now, you can think about that and say, I'm okay to do this. But again, being an individual, I've sacrificed my kids' birthdays. I've sacrificed kids' dance recitals or hockey, sacrificed my own birthdays with my kids. So, like I said, I think there's some times where, as an individual, if you're looking for those corporate opportunities, is just take a step back and make sure that the decisions I'm making, I'm not going to regret in 5, 10, 15 years because I've missed these life moments, which is, I think, is why we're here. Some of the people I've worked with are now mending the
mhm.
relationships with the kids
Okay.
that has fractured, or addictions, or other things
Right.
too. So I mean, the corporate world is very, it's good, but it's
Okay.
also life sucking,
I
right?
I hear you.
Yeah,
Listeners, don't go to place. We're going to just be right back, but I want to ask while we're taking this break, give you some information from uh, Tristina, and I want to ask her if listeners of this podcast are interested in contacting you, you have a book, or how can they find more about what you do? Uh, could you share a little bit uh, about that with podcast listeners?
sure. I have a website. It's www.unlockyourpowerwithin, all one word, .ca, because I'm in Canada.
Okay.
They can find me on Facebook and Instagram again with Unlock Your Power Within. They can email me at Tristina unlockyourpowerwithin.ca. And I also have my memoir, which again goes through my life's
Okay.
earthquake moments, which I talk, and that can be found at www.resiliencebook.ca.
Okay. Thank you
Yeah,
so very much. I hope listeners got that, and those who hear this podcast will be able to hear this again. So thank you for sharing that, Christina. Uh, what are two more questions I want to ask you? What are the key principles brave thinking, how can we apply them? Because obviously you have gone through this, you've done it. And so I want you to kind of share with podcast listeners that might help them.
I think for myself, when I think about brave thinking, it's if I didn't take this step, would I be okay with the result?
Mm.
And if
Uh,
I'm not okay with that, I
mhm.
have to muster up the courage. And that's really difficult sometimes.
Okay. Mm. I love that. Now, uh, most people I know like to feel that they are financially okay. Most people, there's some who might not care, but most people want to,
Mhm.
you know, to amaze a little something and leave to their children and grandchildren or what have you. Uh, how can anyone change their mindset to attract financial prosperity?
I think it's again, it's how we think, right? Money is
Mhm.
energy like everything else. But if you think, I wish I was out of debt, you're going to attract more debt. I
Mm.
wish I could, make an extra $250 a month before the end of the month. You're only going to have that cap. So again, it's changing the mindset instead of I wish I was out of debt. Say you have a credit card statement or something. Change your mindset and how you think about I'm so happy and grateful that my credit card balance is paid in full.
Oh,
Right? So if we think of those words, we think of debt, we're going to continue to attract that. Or I'm
mm.
so happy and grateful that I have extra $500 a month to be able to do A, B, and C, or whatever you're thinking. So it's again the universe or whatever somebody's belief is doesn't understand whether debt's a positive or negative. It just thinks debt. So we just change how we think of things, and yeah,
Tress,
it's all about the mindset.
you're awesome. You're helping me today. You want anytime you want to come back on, let me know.
No, for sure. It's been awesome.
Wow, this is great. I've enjoyed the conversation, talking with you, and I know podcast listeners will truly enjoy this interview. It's been a joy talking with you, Tristina. And again, I want to just thank you for agreeing to share on the Deal by Me podcast.
Thank you, Dr. Smith, and thank you again to your audience.
Good. And until next time, peace and blessings be with each of you.